eve of grave decision on April 2nd, 1917, an anxious president, Woodrow Wilson, voices his forebodings. Once lead this people into war, and they'll forget there ever was such a thing as tolerance. To fight, you must be brutal and ruthless. Conformity would be the only virtue. Days later, with the president leading as he must, America is at war. All doubts are now submerged. All separate voices drowned out by the great chorus of the war effort. Do your bit for the boys over there. Over here, the home front will face the trials the president foresaw, and adventures the nation will remember, with regret and with nostalgia. The spirit of 17 on the American home front. A nation rallying to the war. Behind them, keeping the spirit moved, is the machinery of government. A new agency set up by the president under a journalist named George Creel, with his Committee on Public Information, which will grow from a handful to 150,000. Creel tackles the war effort as a plain publicity proposition, the world's greatest adventure in advertising. It will be an all-star production, offstage and on. The March King, John Philip Sousa, drumming up sales of Liberty Bonds, with a star of the Metropolitan Opera, Anna Case, as soloist. Mary Roberts Reinhardt, the mystery writer, is sent on a reporter's tour of the battlefronts. Booth Tarkington, author of the bestseller Penrod, writes on American facts and German propaganda. Young novelist Edna Ferber turns out press releases for distribution to the Allies. So does America's preeminent man of letters, William Dean Howells, in behalf of the Creel Committee's Foreign Press Bureau. Mary Pickford and other stars of the infant medium, the movies, make personal appearances as salesmen for Uncle Sam. Comedienne Marie Dressler in a gesture of warning to Kaiser Bill. Some new acts are formed, never seen before or after, on stage or screen. Charlie Chaplin teams up with Douglas Fairbanks and a young heavyweight challenger named Jack Dempsey. To weld the people of the United States into one white-hot mass, instinct with fraternity, devotion, courage, and deathless determination. This is the mission in the words of George Creel. The country's artists are told, draw till it hurts. Magazine illustrator James Montgomery Flagg paints posters that will become to millions of Americans enduring images of the war. In art and literature, the home front celebrates a new national hero, the Doughboy. starting in July 1917, makes potential heroes of some 3 million men who will be called on to do their bit in uniform. And the American family acquires a new weekend pastime, a Sunday visit to your doughboy in camp. Along with relatives and friends comes a parade of visiting VIPs. Billy Sunday, the National League outfielder turned evangelist, tours the country with inspiring sermons. Rout the enemy, upset autocracy, and set up liberty throughout the world. The president, who suffered such forebodings at the prospect of war, calls for force. Force without stint or limit. Righteous and triumphant force. Untouched by battle, the American landscape is altered by the war. Washington, once described as a drowsy capital, becomes a boomtown in 1917. This is the time in American history when government grows into big government, spending almost as much on the 20-month war as in the previous century and a quarter of its history. Dozens of new agencies, a federal payroll that nearly doubles, from 500,000 employees to almost 1 million, not to mention the unpaid volunteers. Liberty bonds, Allied relief, Red Cross, scores of wartime causes. For just $1 a year, government secures the services of some of its most distinguished citizens, an army of businessmen like Thomas A. Edison and Bernard Baruch. One observer calls Washington a patriotic madhouse. Henry Ford comes to talk war production. The president's cabinet, average age 54, gets into the wartime spirit of fitness and into the swing of wartime activity. Secretary of the Treasury McAdoo, the president's son-in-law. Navy Secretary Daniels. Assistant Secretary Franklin D. Roosevelt. The great adventure in advertising keeps government in the public eye. For President Wilson and his Secretary of War, Newton D. Baker, a new piece of Army equipment becomes a news event. One of the new faces in government, Herbert Hoover, organizer of worldwide relief for Belgium in 1915, now summoned to run the food program at home. Battalions of volunteers work farms and plant war gardens to help feed the nation and the Allies. For housewives, the watchwords are, save food. The public translates it into Hooverize. Out in the field, for women and youngsters, the slogan is, do a man's job. Love may not change, but motherhood will never be the same after this war. America's women, taking on a man's job, work up new arguments to support their demands for the vote. Demands that will be fulfilled in a constitutional amendment after the war. How are you going to keep them out of the voting booth after they've helped win the war?